Welcome to Scrap Farm, the newsletter / podcast where I discuss starting a farm, its realities, and the work towards a fairer and more just food system. Magda, and as a difficult one, trigger warning suicide. I have a bit of an ix of recently with any has made it harder for me, right? This is the fact that I own nothing mad, nope. I'm unaware of the situation. I need a job that pays $29,000 annually to get my partner into the UK. And the incentive to move to the UK is more pressing than ever. We have no updates on land in the UK, and where I currently am after 2 weeks of visiting my partner in California. Yes, it was ablaze when I arrived. There was some movement, some jostling on the front of the land in the US, but it's very much up in the air. I have very little to report, and that honestly made me dread writing an update. But I remind myself that I'm writing to show the difficulties of starting a farm when you aren't landed, rich, or very lucky, to show the realities of international moves or attempts at them, of the system. Well, after talking to you, it looks nicer to ring last week. And men died. Well, in all ways, unexpected. Alarming farm committing side just you at the UK. I'm pretty sure trendably. I may talk about this another time, but for now I want to remember the man. My partner and I had talked to him less than a month ago. He told us he was proud and excited for what to do, and even being that we want to throw a phone at home. Casey Piscura taught me all I'd know about plant breeding, seed keeping, vegetable growing, and showing up for community. After an absolute shit show of a year, he and his then partner Kirsten nurtured my world-weary 26-year-old soul back from the brink of despair. They did so with hard labour, delicious meals, and the kind of grace I was lucky to be afforded. Working on their farm in Colorado, I realised that farming was not only something I could do, but something I wanted to do, possibly forever. It was a busy year. I was learning the basics of plant breeding, I was realising the dream of feeding people with real dirt work, and I was falling in love. This was the farm where I met my partner nearly 4 years ago and where we began our journey together. Working at Wild Mountain Seeds for just one season was the foundation for the rest of my farming career has been built off. The high I chase when dreaming of the future. I came to them broken and burnt out and left beautifully exhausted and solar powered. During my first few weeks on the farm, when I was still testing how much of a British sass Americans can take, which it turns out is quite a lot, I asked Casey about feeling bad for killing all the tomatoes left out in the frost trials. I was just making conversation, but I was also kind of being an arse. His earnest answer took me off guard, that he felt a great responsibility towards stewarding the varieties, finding the strongest and most hardy, but he still thought about the sacrifice of each tomato plant. This passion and compassion can be tasted in the varieties that he worked on, frost-tolerant purple-stemmed wonders, sweeter than scents and in all the miraculous shades. More than the fruits of his labour was the honesty and that interwoven care that cracked open a little bit of my British self, told kindly and sincerely to shut up. The old proverb that Casey quoted most often was that the best fertiliser is a farmer's footsteps, bringing attention to what you do and it will bloom. At all times I try to bring even a fraction of the attention that he brought to farming to what I do. Casey was kind, passionate, and different. I think that's important to say, not to disparage him, but to point out the joy in it. As in the highest honour, he bred vegetables, marvellous, delicious, soil-sprung varieties. He stewarded with such attention, and from the glorious differences, the mutations, the imperfections, he created sweet colour blush strains. From the plethora of Maxima squash varieties, he made a culinary landrace that to this day I have never tasted better. And from all the little differences, he coaxed something so beautiful. He did that with apprentices too, although at times people are hard and more complex than vegetables. Casey gave people the space to be themselves and acknowledged his own humanity at the same time, and I will forever be grateful to him for that. As I try to forge forward on this farming endeavour, I've been thinking about lineage, the people who we learn from. I was taught by Kim Bayer from Slow Farm, Janet Ardemer and Dan Gagnon from Broadfork Farm. I was taught through reading and podcasts by Carol Deppy, Vandana Shiva, Chris Blanchard, Rowan White, Dan Brisbois, Chris Newman, John Navazio, Owen Smith-Taylor, Chris Bowden-Newsome, and there are so many more, but I think they need naming. But before all that, I was taught by Casey Piscura and Kirsten Keenan. I owe them a great debt that I may never repay. Last summer, and the one before it, I got the chance to begin teaching people how to farm. My partner and I were on the other end of training, shepherding a team as best we could. And now we get to check in on the people we taught and say what they're doing, and I could not be more proud if I tried. One is a grower for the Refugee Garden Initiative, which provides income for single immigrant mothers, and the other started a seed swap and workshops through her library group. There are more of them too, and they are doing caring and nourishing wherever they go. The flow of knowledge doesn't just go forward, it goes both forwards and backwards. It's not something to hold, but something to give freely. And now comes the bit that I really don't want to do. Not because I'm not excited, but because it feels sleazy to promote something off the back of this recent news. I don't want to do anything off the back of this recent news, but I remind myself that I want to share the knowledge that has been shared with me. I want to connect with other young farmers and get the conversation going. And I want to nourish connection and let people know that they are not alone in this. At 7 p.m. on the 20th of February, I'll be hosting a speaker's corner with Emergent Generation. My talk will focus on seed keeping and all that entails, from the basics of plant breeding to the technicalities of saving, processing and cleaning seed, to how this is useful in climate resilience. It's free to anyone and everyone, though for people who are aged 18 to 35, interested in changing our food system and working to restore ecosystems, I would urge signing up with Emergent Generation. And that's all the plug I feel comfortable with, honestly. All of this has barely touched on the worsening situation across the pond, the federal funding grants, such as for greenhouses, that have at least been attempted to be paused, the government being actively dismantled, and some little tech boys gaining access to the treasury. Guantanamo Bay, which never closed, I would like to point out, is expanding. So let's call a coup a coup. And I still can't get my partner into the UK, something we have talked about for years, but at this point feels like running away and is very complicated. In all this political grief, I am trying not to let it freeze me. There is the personal grief of losing a mentor, and more than that, my friend. When I work my way through the fog of despair these days, I am reminded of lineage, of the flowing of care and attention, of passion and knowledge that I am just a small part of. That Casey was just a small part of, although a huge part for me. That we are teachers and being taught. There are good people out there fighting on all different fronts, and we only have to fight on together. That's not to say we should slide complacently into the bitter good night that the US seems intent on enforcing, nor let despair drag us down into inaction. But if you look, you will find people doing things. Join them. Volunteer at your local food bank, protect the abortion clinics we have left, talk to your neighbours, donate to institutions you believe in, and berate your local representative. Call them is best, I've heard. And of course, boycott, divest, sanction. Support people who put their bodies on the line to protest, either with food or funds. I keep thinking about the United Farm Workers' support for the Black Panthers and how all our struggles are interwoven. So here it is. Here I am. Grief-stricken, I am carrying on. Heartbroken, I am persisting. When I know what we're doing next, so will all of you, but for now, see you on the flip side.